live button. And second to last episode of Goddess Vibrations. We are live. This is Rich Mom, Poor Mom. We're going to be talking about feminine energy and abundance. I'm just trying to figure out my screen here. Here we go. And anybody that's joining us live, please ask us questions. Please comment, participate if you're here. I know I didn't have this posted on Instagram till the last minute, but that's how it works sometimes. We are in the flow today. Kirti and I had a little pre-talk. We're juicy, we're ripe, we're rested. I went to Kirti's dance class on Sunday. It was raining. I even asked her, Kirti, is it raining? She's like, nope, it's not raining here. And I'm like, all right, I'll do it. And I get there and I'm like, but it's all right. Like I knew I had to go and I knew I was going to feel amazing afterwards because I always do. And I did. And yeah, so definitely charged up, juiced up for this topic. And this topic was Kirti's idea. So start it off. What are we, I titled it Rich Mom, Poor Mom, just off of the book, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But what did you have in mind when you were talking about building true abundance with feminine energy?
Well, what brought it up for me was actually the realization that I was really feeling challenged in building true abundance with my feminine energy. And it felt like I kept trying to, fit a spiral inside of something that was a repeated circular pattern, or just this like straight approach or very linear. And I wanted, there wasn't space for the curves. And I'm curious, like, why can't I just get this? Why can't I be successful at this system? And I think oftentimes, there's women out there who feel like they have the potential to be super successful, and they know that what they have to offer is beneficial and helpful and a lot of times healing to the community. And when you try to put your business out there, or you put it together to put it out there, it almost can quickly feel like quicksand. And it feels like, man, how can I, if the true power of the feminine is to birth and to create and to bring life to things, when it comes to business and entrepreneurship, there's so many women that struggle, with this part, even though we clearly, most of the women that show up in their own businesses have a very strong masculine force, because that's what got them there, right? And a lot of times the women they become leaders in organizations. However, when they decide to leave the system and create their own, it oftentimes is a big challenge. And so I've been really unwinding that self that self. I love that it came out that way, because that is a reflection of a one of my selves. It's like of a part of me that once existed and lived, and I really feel like I'm trying to reparent that part of me. So that's where this whole topic came from. And I guess to start off this conversation with you, because I know you're a successful entrepreneur, and we've always talked about the ins and outs of that. Like, what do we truly identify as success? And what one person says is success could be somebody else's, like, what? You call that a success? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's nothing, right? Someone say, that's everything. So all that aside, like the true idea of like being able to pay rent and the bills and put gas in the car, have your refrigerator full of healthy food for your body, these types of things, to be able to have comfortable access to that. And for me, taking care of my family, my mother, my immediate family, and my partner's family. Like, I want to feel like we can be comfortable. So just in that, wanting to attain that level of financial stability on my own, and not wanting to do it working for somebody else, I'm realizing that the deepest programming at play here is that I only know how to show up when I'm serving somebody. Right? And I think that that's a very deep storyline for women. And, I was listening to this woman, her name's Dr. Valerie, and she has this book. And this book that she was talking about, and it's interesting. She calls it patriarchal stress disorder is the
Oh,
title.
I've heard of that. Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but I've heard about that
Yeah.
book.
Patriarchy stress disorder. And I was saying, you know what, actually, the framework PTSD is perfect if you were even to say patriarchal trauma stress disorder, because literally every human being is walking this planet with trauma of the patriarchy and the system of power and control that has been at play.
Mm-hmm.
And she was spitting some really dope gems, but two of the facts that she shared was 1960 was the first year a woman was able to open her own bank account in the United States of America. And we know it probably wasn't an indigenous woman of color or a
Right.
slave, right? So let's keep it real. Like, what type of woman? And it probably was a woman of an aristocrat, or she
Mm-hmm.
compromised. She was needed for something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then 1988 was the first year a woman could take out a business loan from a bank. So this is like in our own lifetime or in our mother's and grandmother's lifetime. So this whole idea of, you know, if we talk about cells and cellular memory and epigenetics and things that are genetic and ancestral wounds, all of the different names that we have for learned behavior and the way we live life, it makes it pretty real, where it's like, wow, no wonder this has kind of been a tough journey and process for me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what made me want to have this conversation. You know, I don't doubt that there are other women entrepreneurs out there who are wanting to start their businesses from a feminine energy perspective, a Shakti
Mm-hmm.
um, place, and be successful in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder, if is that even a possibility?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, I think so, but in my promo for this show, I talked about how I've had the opportunity to work with several older gentlemen who have been very, very successful in their businesses over decades. And not only are they supporting their families, but they're supporting multiple families that are employed by their business. And what strikes me, more often than not, they are aware now in their 60s or 70s that they sacrificed. They were in service in an indirect way, because the heart was there to support their families and be a good provider, but they
Right.
didn't realize until their later years, when their adult children really didn't talk to them, didn't visit them,
Mm-hmm.
didn't come around, that they had never built that relationship with them, because they were always working and they were always gone. There's nothing that, besides maybe children, there's nothing that makes my heart melt more than this divine masculine man who's maybe all gruff on the outsides, but then finally lets his vulnerability out and softens his heart and says, hey, this is how I'm really feeling. And it just melts my heart. And so I've loved working with these gentlemen. I work with the divine feminine. So it's like, whether it's women that I'm helping to empower, or if it's men that are wanting to get more in touch with this feminine energy that you're talking about. And so, they've been successful financially, but they are not satisfied with their life. They might have already lost their health to a chronic condition that cannot be reversed. They're working on it. And they're trying to see, can I fix this? And I believe, you can rebuild those relationships in adulthood, but, again, at what cost? There's those milestones, those things that you've missed. And I feel that then there, on the other side, there's the mothers who are there for every event, everything, but they didn't listen to their dreams. They didn't follow their dreams. They didn't believe they could do it. They gave up, because let's face it, there are more obstacles for
Right.
women, and particularly women of color and people of color. And so they thought, I'm going to let this get me, and it's just the way that it is, and all of this. And I'm not saying that those things aren't valid, because I think it's really important to point those out and not perseverate on them.
Mm.
And then there's no balance. And I know when I first started my business, as you said, like, my success up until that point came from the masculine way of doing things. That's how I got my degrees. That's how I got my exams and my papers written, just pushing till my health started to fail. And I had to stop and rest and sleep and do those things and pay attention to my children. I would wonder every day, like, am I ruining their lives by being less available
Mm.
as I'm trying to do this full-time job, working with other kids in a school, and then coming home and working on this PhD, and then trying to build a business? Like, it's not possible. It's not going to happen. And then I finally realized I had to quit the 9 to 5 and reshuffle my priorities. Okay, so this is feminine energy. It's like reshuffling the priorities, doing at the end of your life, what is wealth to you? What is your most valuable possession when you start to leave this 3D material world and you go into some kind of afterlife? And so I try to work backwards and always project myself to that endpoint and say, am I satisfied? Am I happy? And that becomes a moment to moment mindfulness. And I could get a little caught up in that too, the pleasure seeking, the joy, like, I'm just going to dance with my kids and have a fun time. And sometimes it works. Sometimes I'm like, okay, they needed me. I'm going to stop everything for them. And then whatever important deadline I had, magically disappears and gets moved. And I'm like, yes, that does happen. But there was a time where I was really using my magnetism, my joy, my radiance, all of those feminine energy qualities, because I was engaging in so much self-care, and it was attracting so much business to me, but I couldn't keep the business because I didn't have the masculine structures in place to get it going like this. So just for instance, like, somebody would come and say, I want to work with you, but I didn't have my package created. I didn't have my price point created. I was just like, cool, I want to work with you too. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I pay you? Oh, shoot, let me send you, where do you have any forms? Oh, I got to spend 5 hours editing the forms, and then I get back to them. They've already moved on to either someone else or something else. The ones that really fell in love with me hung in there and waited for me to get my shit together. I even worked with the top executive at Apple, and she said to me, she's like, your work is amazing, but she's like, your online persona, your presence does not show the value of your work. She's like, you have to make it efficient for people. And I'm like, I know, but I don't have those tech skills. But I feel like that's the masculine. The masculine's like, I can't do it. Hire somebody to do it. Oh, throw down some money. Like, just work harder. It's very logical, like you said, very linear. And so I think if we get too caught up on either side of that, we're not moving forward very fast. We're going to have either a bunch of money in your bank account and you're alone.
Yeah.
And you're not happy, or you're going to have these beautiful babies dancing and laughing around you and, get to sleep until 10, but you're like, oh shit, now rent's due next month. You're making just enough to get by. And, to be honest, I've been on I've been, I've swung to both sides of that, and I'm still trying to find the integration myself. And so, yeah, I consider myself successful, depending on how you define that. And I consider myself a failure sometimes, depending on how you define that. And I don't even know what is the standard anymore. I don't know. I think it's just your own personal values. But I think it's something that as a society, as a collective, we're still working out. As you and I have talked about, we know there's been this explosion of interest in the divine feminine and giving more voice to that, space to that. That's the inspiration for this show. This how you and I, gravitated to each other. And yet both of us are saying before we, pressed record and hit live on this show, that we're both kind of falling back a little bit more into our masculine because it feels safe to do so. Now the world is kind of like lighting up the torch for the feminine a little bit. It's like, okay, like lean back into this other side. So I think, and then also, when I started my business, I was reading wealth building books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the 4-Hour Work Week, and all these books written by men, and it's like, they're good and I don't fully identify. And I was just reading these consulting books that I read from my consulting course in my PhD. And I'm like, he's saying good things, but I don't see how this fits in 100% to my way of doing things. But I, through a network marketing business, had a big tribe of divine feminine elders who, are leaders in the health and wellness field, who, use these products to complement as a product partner to their business. And they were like helping me very generously with how to bring that feminine way of doing business and attraction marketing, they call it. And so it was a synergy of both of those things. And I know that that helped me be successful. And perhaps what I created, I built my business to 6 figures within 4 years. Maybe I would have preferred to do that in 1 or 2 years. And yet I did it, and I still had, the 4 year mark, had my health, and my babies are happy, and everybody's taken care of. And so that's a big win. That's a big win for me. I don't really have too many regrets.
Wow, that's great.
And still working on it, still tweaking and improving and learning how to do it better.
Yeah, so I mean, the concept in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what would you
Mhm.
sum up like the main concept and theme of that book?
Yeah, so he had his biological father who was poor, and his stepfather who was rich. And so
Mm-hmm.
he got to learn from both of them. And so he really looked at the subconscious training of mindset and how we are kind of programmed to be employees to make somebody else wealthy. And there's other ways to do it. So he talked a lot about like investing. And he even said, in his book, join a network marketing company for your first 5 years in business, because you get so much free training. You just start to absorb the mindset of these other entrepreneurs. And then you can apply that to whatever business you're going to create or start. For me, it just happens I'm still with my same network marketing company because it's so aligned with my mission statement and the work that I do. And it also gives me a check every week of residual income. And so his idea is like, rather than, getting away from this dollars for hours mindset and more into this residual income mindset. And I honestly feel that that is actually feminine energy, because you mentioned birth and creation. It's not a quick process.
Mm-mm.
The sperm shoots out. It only has to it takes 2 weeks to create some sperm.
Mm-hmm.
It shoots out, can shoot out in a couple of minutes. It's there, it does its job. But 9 to 10 months to nurture and incubate that life, once the egg
Yeah.
is fertilized. And so the feminine energy principle, it always takes longer. It's always like knowing. And then this is another phenomena that happened in my relationship as well, and many other relationships of people I work with, is that when there's a new baby coming and a man has not been a father yet, it's hard for him to make it real. And if you're a little bit larger framed bone structure like me, I didn't even show until I was about 6, 7 months pregnant, because I just have a bigger body. And so you couldn't see the bump, for a while. And it wasn't real to him. And it's very real to me, because I'm feeling all the body changes, the little nuances. I'm thinking about the future, all of these things, how to be a nurturer. And it wasn't until that baby came out and he held her and it was very material and tangible that he got it, and then he became this
Wow.
devoted father to this little girl, that his offspring, his legacy. But before then, I'm just this crazy woman with these crazy ideas about wanting like a stable home and an extra bedroom and like all of
Like,
these,
we're gonna do
these
something.
things. And so it's really interesting to look at it that way. And so when you're doing things like making residual income or making money, even if it's a little bit to start while you sleep, or making, doing things that you're putting a lot of work in, like the show we were just talking about. We don't get paid to do this. We may or may not get some clients as we go, as we do this. We show up every week regardless. That's the masculine drive. That's a consistency. But the payoff, is we're not attached to that outcome. It's something that we're feeling joyful about, we're passionate about, we like to talk about these things. And then one day, it might help us align with that perfect client or that perfect collaboration or partnership or whatever, because we have this whole library of stuff that we're content experts on, that's just right there, published for anyone to see, self-published through YouTube, through our channels, through our videos. That would be the birth. That's the birth process. That's the several months of gestation, I guess.
Yes.
So I feel like, again, even in that book, when you're talking about residual income, that is sort of a feminine trust. It's like, it's coming. The baby is going to be born one day. It's not here yet. And even companies like Nike, I read about this. So Nike is just do it. You couldn't get more masculine than that. Just do it. It took them at least 5 years before they were even in the black. They were red, in debt, for a while. So even these huge companies, they had to trust that what they were doing was eventually going to pay off. And when I read that, I felt a lot better about my progress and how long it was taking. It's just not a quick game.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett, if you watch the movie Becoming Warren Buffett, it's very beautiful. It's a documentary. And I was surprised by how emotionally intelligent he is with the feminine concept and
Right.
with people of color and women and whatnot. And he knew, he did the math, very masculine, analytical, left side of the brain, to figure out, if I keep applying this formula in 20, 25 years, 30 years, I'm going to be a very wealthy man. And now I think he's the second wealthiest man in the world. If I'm not, I think I just heard that reiterated again. I wasn't sure like who's above who at this point,
Right.
but
Right.
but he's so much a humanitarian. It was all about giving it back. So I think you can still be of service, but you're not of service every hour of the day. You're doing what you do so that you could be in service in a big way down the road. And that's him in the charities that he donates to, and the things that he has. And of course, billionaires also are in it, I think, for the power and influence and things that they get to do that way. But he seems like a generally good-hearted man in my limited exposure of him through that documentary and other things that I've read about him. But I feel like that's, he waited those decades and decades, and he knew the payout wasn't coming for a long time, but when it did, it was going to be big.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that the patience piece is big. And when you were talking about the concept of rich dad, poor dad, I think that that actually speaks pretty strongly to, exactly what I was sharing in terms of navigating, like that there's this thing in me that I only know how to perform when I'm in service.
Mm,
And I think that the subconscious piece that you were speaking of, it's about retraining the subconscious and the mindset.
mhm.
Um, I think that that's where we do get into the ancestral healing of all of this. And this is where we do start to tap into the abundance code, the true abundance code, right? And I feel that being able to discern between programming around abundance, and as well as true divine feminine intuition, is kind of a big piece here too, because um, certain things of business, which I think is a big concept that is coming through in corporations today, Shakti leadership, this idea.
Mm,
We can see it even in educational institutions with
mhm,
whole child, right, and mindfulness
mhm,
and the whole brain, all of this stuff. That's definitely honoring, bringing back this healing, intuitive STEAM schools with the arts and bringing arts into the science and math and technology and math stuff. So I definitely do see that piece, that we're realizing that it's necessary. Like,
mhm.
you have the structures and the systems, but you also need like the creative flow that's happening between all these systems. And I think what you were talking to is that, oh, you have you have this creative flow, and you also need you need this structure to be able to, kind of channel your flow and make it work for you, like have it be a circuit of like give and receive, which I
Totally.
totally see that. And I think that that ultimate vision there is understanding like the beautiful integration of the divine masculine and feminine in successful entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And I think where I'm at is in the place, maybe I'm on my way developing that. And what I'm really noticing is like, wow, these speed bumps, um, that seem like they're pretty tiny. The closer I get, I'm like, whoa, not only are they pretty big, but it's going to require like some hydraulics in my in my subconscious to like really uproot this. And so it's been making me think about culture and how we're raised around money, and then also just the history of money and power in this country. And then, it always brings it back to, the system and conditioning and the program, and the fact that we even need to reprogram any part of our natural existence lets us know that, like, we're having to, in order to remember our power,
Mhm.
we're having to reprogram out of something that's been taught to us. And so
Mhm.
it always makes me go back to like, wow, what an interesting thing that we are responsible for the very system that restricts our thinking so that we can liberate from it. And
Mhm.
that is the true abundance code.
Mhm.
It's like, as a woman, to realize that, to remember that your feminine energy in your woman body, this goddess element of you, this goddess essence of you, is the reason for all things on the planet,
Mhm.
and requires um, a consistent reworking of, like, I guess, understanding, rewiring the patriarchy. It's like you have to remember your power,
Yeah.
and like trust that, all nature's got this, because nature always has this, and
Mhm.
what we know to be true in the spiritual sense.
Mhm.
And as at the same time, you have to consciously be aware of the power dynamic, and I almost feel like pick and choose your battles, because it's everywhere and it's
Mhm.
in all facets. So yes, I think real abundance is, it's diverse, and it means something different for everybody.
Mhm.
And I feel that I want to encourage people to dive deep into that for themselves. Like, what does abundance truly mean for you? Like, are you somebody that wants to, like, when I think to myself, my definition of abundance has been pretty different from my partners. And I look back, and like, for me, honestly, it hasn't really ever changed that much since I was like 19, which is, I want a big enough home that's easy to clean myself,
Mhm.
you know, that I can maintain easily. And I want enough belongings that, you know, I feel comfortable, but I'm not burdened.
Mm.
And I'd rather live simply and travel more
Mhm.
than live extravagant and travel less,
Mhm.
you know? So that's
Mhm.
kind of just been things that I've always desired, but I've definitely changed for somebody else's definition of abundance.
Mhm.
And now, as I'm in this position of power, I feel, truly feel, really believe, because my family doesn't have a business for me to feel like I need to work for my family,
Mhm.
right? I'm not, a part of the educational system where I need to feel like I'm running a school or a staff. And
Mhm.
so it's truly me, and it's bringing up all of those pieces, big
Yeah.
time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I resonate. I mean, it's very similar values as well. And but there's that part of me too that's like, I want to live in luxury and travel a lot. And so, but I'm also realistic about what that would require. And even I finally found a show that all four of my family members like to watch together. So me and the kids, 10-year-old, 13-year-old, and Rich, and it's HGTV, Love It or List It, which is, when the homeowners are like, we're outgrowing our house. And so of course we're all feeling this right now, right? And everybody's getting bigger. And they have this designer come in, and she just makes the space more functional. Of course, we're energy people, the energy flows better, it feels fresh and clean, and she designs it gorgeously. And then they get to decide if they're going to love it and stay there, or they're going to list it now with the extra equity she's created, the value.
Right.
About feminine energy, she put her little magical, feminine touches on there, and it's now increased in value. And they can list it and go into a bigger house or whatever. And it's just like intoxicating for all of us to watch this show. So I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what is it that we're all looking into. But it's the improvement aspect, and it's the just bouncing your own values off of each of these people that are on the show and their values. And it's interesting to me because there are some people that are like, no, we're all about the income. I know if we increase the value, they're numbers people, we increase the value, then we can move to the next place, like increase the value there, and then we pay cash for the next place, and then pretty soon, and it's a great business plan. This is why
Right.
people flip houses. But can I live in a place that's continually has sawdust and this moving in and that moving in and all this other stuff? I don't think I can. I'm
Yeah.
very particular about my environment, and I like it to be a sanctuary.
Yeah.
And I say I can deal with anything in the outside world as long as my home space is sacred and comfortable and clean and beautiful and soft and nurturing. Then I can pretty much deal with anything. It's my cocoon.
Right.
So it's a
Love it.
different, yeah, it's a different value system. And even with traveling, as much as I love traveling, I know if I did it too much, I wouldn't love it. I would feel anxious and stressed and like I'm trying to navigate. I don't even like to Google things to find out how to do new things. And then you're in a whole new environment. So I prefer to travel in a group. I prefer to go with some sort of collective. That's fun for me in that moment. It doesn't feel like I have so much burden or responsibility. So I feel like, yeah, just, like you said, looking at our values and then really thinking like, are these our values or are these the values that have been imposed on me by my family, by this patriarchal society? And what are we really doing? And there is a lot to unwind. It's coming at us from so many different levels of these obstacle speed bumps, as you call them, to move over. And I made the analogy to you in a text message about relationships. And one thing that I've noticed over the past couple of years is that if I make some statements about money and I substitute men for money, it usually also is
Mhm.
consistently true. And you talked about going to the roots, the root chakra, the survival instinct, the
Yeah.
security, the food, the water, the safe roof over your head, that sort of thing. And there's so many Americans right now that are food insecure or don't know if the roof is going to stay over their head. And that is not abundance. We are not a wealthy country in my mind because we don't have that. We don't have healthcare if somebody accidentally falls sick from all of the cancerous chemicals that are pumped into the environment now from these unconscious companies who are just
Mhm.
looking at numbers and not looking at the true value of their product or what they're doing to the environment or the people consuming their waste products. And so, there ought to be more of a universal collective collaborative system of entrepreneurs working together. And of course there's more now than there ever has been, but we're still trying to detach and untangle and unwind and relearn, like you said, from that old system. And then so how much of it are we perpetuating? Just like everything, like the racism, the sexism, it's like we get mad at it and then we find ourselves spouting off something that's super racist or sexist, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, like where did that come from? This is the
Right. And
soup.
I mean, I think that leads all ultimately to like the very challenges that, like for example, the very challenges I might be dealing with in terms of attracting more financial abundance. Like that's the big piece right now. And that's
Mhm,
something I've been working on for a while. I even worked on it as a salaried employee, like in terms of asking for raises. Like
mhm,
I would notice people around me being much more inclined in terms of asking for raises, more Americans asking for raises. And I'm an American, but I just was very much raised, I think, to just be so thankful for what I was getting.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so never really asking for a raise nor expecting one, never asking for more than I received. Working for different places. So these are some things that I'm working through now.
mhm,
And I think that, yeah, that's a really important question. So that's why I'm noticing like, well, where is my value system? Because I could look at a price point and think, oh, well, this is what the going rate is out there.
mhm.
However, if that doesn't feel aligned with what my worth is, it's not going to bring it in.
Yeah.
And so that's really an interesting concept, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, wow, like, well, what about me, this is what again brings in the masculine conversation
Mhm,
because, oh well, what inside of me feels less valuable and lacks worth, so okay, let's
mhm,
do that work. Okay, boom boom boom, so we bring in worth and value to that which lacks love. Okay, boom, release that which doesn't serve us. Boom, we focus on the things that are working in our lives, and we begin to bring that code into the things that we're avoiding. Okay, so things start to shift and transmute.
mhm.
And as you're doing the work, you start to notice that this is there's deep stuff there that makes it so real for you in terms of like in terms of human value, like within the system, and I feel like sovereignty value,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like just even being out of the system for this long, and I'm still not out of the system. I have a contract where I'm working for a public charter school, uh,
Mm-hmm.
an online charter school. So that's homeschooling. So it's a remix, I could say, of the system. Like there's definitely way more independence.
Mm-hmm.
But I still do get that retirement and that medical, coverage and all these salary type things. And however, the truth is like if I even decided like, oh, I don't want that and that's not really an option.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I don't really like that way. I don't want to participate in this type of health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might think like, oh wow, I'm finally taken care of and I'm making it, but the more that you're making it, it's like you're tying yourself down in terms of being like an entrepreneur. And then the more you become an entrepreneur, you realize like, oh, I've got to like find unique ways of still being tapped into that system. So it's just a wild beast, and I feel like it reminds me of doing so much of the other shadow work, uh,
Mm-hmm.
when I was doing healing my feminine. And
Mm-hmm.
as I was healing my feminine, you do it, you transmute, you release. I think that's what I was trying to get to before. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're ready to step into your purpose and recreate something, and the masculine comes in to create structures of something new.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you start to just realize like, wow, like this is all really a game taking us towards redefining and remembering uh,
Mm-hmm.
what perhaps our own unique, authentic uh, abundance is, or what is. And I really think that on the one hand, you have fully engaged in a system where everything in your life is run by a third party. And
Mm-hmm.
on the complete opposite, you are responsible for everything in your life, from the food you put in your mouth to the shelter that you live under to the electricity, everything. Like you're sovereign on the land.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that you have to really get clear on if that's your number line, if that's your duality, what is your reality? What's your desired reality? And then do that magic you were talking about
Yeah.
of the feminine and the masculine integration. And
Mm-hmm.
as you hit the speed bumps, realize, have the question with yourself. I really like that. Have the question with yourself like, okay, is this a speed bump because I'm avoiding, or is this a speed bump because I'm embodying?
Mm-hmm.
I have to push through with my masculine energy, and we have to be a team. My two male and female selves have to be a team.
Mm-hmm.
Or is this like, oh, this is the program just totally trying to keep me back and avoiding me from stepping into my power?
Mm-hmm.
And do the work to hear that resonance pretty clear and decide where do you land, because you're right, it's like, okay, am I going to be a race, am I going to fight racism, am I going to fight white power, am I going to be fighting the feminist cause, am I fighting the environmentalist cause?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many causes. I mean, ultimately we should be fighting the human cause.
Right.
you know
That's about, yeah.
Ultimately that's the freaking cause, and that cause to me is really nobody tells us or has a right to tell us what we do and what is successful and not successful and what we have access to or not
Mm-hmm.
when we are good people on
Mm-hmm.
the planet, you know
Mm-hmm.
so it's an interesting line. I think it's something to explore, like, why are we trying to start our own businesses? Why are we trying to move up in the ladder? Why are we even working at the places that we are working? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what value system and what are you truly trying to create? And is it from your own desire? Is it from the desire of your mother and your grandmother? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe like, how were you influenced by what they had access to and what they didn't have access to? And how did they program your money story and your abundance code?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you also have the ability to reprogram that by
Mm-hmm.
accessing the subconscious through hypnotherapy, through
Mm-hmm.
past life regressions, through energy healing, through sensuality, like figuring out what truly gets you going. and
Mm-hmm.
send you on, right? Like there's all these ways to find out like what is your, like by finding out your unique abundant code, you actually gain abundance. Otherwise, I'm seeing that it doesn't work any other way.
Yeah, it's like the formula, and that's what I was thinking of when you're saying like what, with the health insurance and all of that, even I'm thinking at this point, I haven't used health insurance since I left my 9 to 5
Sure.
because my business is health, and so that's all I do and I practice what I preach, but I'm also, 44 and eventually, time catches up with you and there's going to be some things that I need. So then my formula might change, about how I'm doing things. And
Right.
it's just, yeah, whatever your formula is. And yeah, those speed bumps, fuck, I've hit all of them. Like I've hit the trauma, the money trauma, speed bumps has come up, have been coming up a lot lately. Just from childhood stuff like you're talking about and seeing my parents struggle or up and down or feast or famine. And then also, my adulthood navigating, this whole wild world on my own. And, like we talked about before we went live too, it's this idea that we're independent and supposed to be successful or supposed to be create some golden place of stability constantly consistently is just not realistic. Even the microbiome needs a colony. It doesn't Bacteria can't even exist without its colony, and we are bacteria. We're made up of trillions of bacteria that is in colonies, and we think we're independent and we can live without other humans is just
Right.
not possible. And so having that support system, whether it's something that the government takes over, I'm the older I get, the more I'm like less government.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm for government if there's some competent people in charge,
Right.
and corruption is away, and they're actually setting like, no, we need strong leadership. No, we are going to take care of our citizens, bottom line.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Right.
Like if somebody's hurt or sick, we have something for them, somewhere for them to go. I've been really enjoying watching my friends in Sweden raise their little baby and just hearing about all the wonderful ways that they're taken care of and as a citizen there. And
Mm-hmm.
she grew up in Santa Barbara. She has Swedish heritage, but grew up in Santa Barbara, and so to see the contrast and the quality of life that she gets to enjoy there as she's raising her family is really beautiful. And I'm inspired by that. And I think that there's different formulas that we can create. And then, yeah, it's mindset work, it's hypnosis, it's all the things. And you're talking about going into the shadows and you're like, oh, here this comes again. I feel like that is the work of the divine feminine, right? The lunar, the cool, the darkness, like going in, not being afraid of the dark. I've never been afraid of the dark, but I don't want to like spend all day there either. Like I like the sun, like even dancing in the rain, it was beautiful, because it's not something I would normally do, but I'm not trying to be there every week, living in Portland, dancing in the rain either,
Well,
because
I mean,
of the
I
sun.
feel like that's why it's kind of like a thing, dancing in the rain.
Right? Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
a
who
great
does
metaphor.
that? And it's like, only when you're crazy do you dance in the rain.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, yeah, that's when breakthroughs happen, is when you're feeling crazy and you follow, you follow the call to just do something you've never done before, because
yeah,
really a gem there. Yeah.
totally. And sometimes I think also it can be we can go into these divine feminine careers too. Even utilizing our own coaches, our own therapists, our own like more feminine workers, and they well-intentioned can keep us there for too long. Like, oh, well, what does that mean? And what does that mean? It's sort of like psychoanalysis and like
Mm,
Freud, and you
yes.
could spend 15 years in psychoanalysis and nothing has changed in their life. They just have more awareness about it. So it's like, how long do you want to dive into that darkness, and at what point do you say like, okay, there may be something here that I haven't uncovered yet, but you know what, I just got to do it, like I just got to get to
Totally.
work. And my coach
Right.
recently said something about like, I got triggered, not necessarily by her, but what she said, which was, what is inside of you that you're not manifesting more, or something like that. And I was like, God damn it, like I have all these credentials, I am confident, I know my worth.
Yeah.
All my only problem is the world doesn't recognize the worth of women, the worth of the value that we offer you too, as being a multidisciplinary human, who is, has, extensive knowledge about the educational
Mhm.
system, extensive knowledge about tantra and sexuality
Yeah.
and kundalini and dance, and like you're multi-passionate, and when we're multi-passionate, like I am as well. I'm a therapist, but I don't identify with a therapist.
Right.
I have a
Totally.
therapist brain, but I also have nutrition credentials and coaching credentials and hypnosis credentials. And really, my label is a consultant because I consult about all of these things. And so if they're looking at me as a therapist and they're like, well, this person that just got out of grad school only charges 150 an hour. Why are you charging this much? And it's like,
Right.
because I'm not a therapist that just got out of grad school. I have a big overview of this whole massive system, and I'm getting you the shortest route to navigate through it. And that is the value. It's a value proposition, and it says nothing about my worth. It's about sometimes branding yourself and getting that love it or list it agent into your business and being like, okay, I see your potential. I see you're not highlighting this, you're not saying this, you're not bringing
Right.
yourself this way. And that's the value of even, a team, and being with other entrepreneurs that are doing similar work, that are high integrity, and all of this, to point these things out in you that but you don't realize you're not communicating them, and letting people know the value when they're having a hard time seeing it at first. We don't recognize
Well, I
sometimes
mean, and I
that
think that
extent.
that's the thing, right? 1960, a woman was first allowed to create a bank account. 1988, the first year that a woman was even allowed to take out a business loan. That this is, if we were to even talk about epigenetics, it's literally not in the soil of this country for girls who are born on this land to even, it's literally in the soil that it's a story that's been told for generations that women are property. They're not meant to own, but rather be owned. They're not meant to work, but be worked. and
Mhm,
and their burdens until we shape and mold them correctly. I mean,
mhm,
there's all sorts of stories of, I mean, I think teaching might have been, maybe it was a female role, but it was also because women were naturally doing it, and it needed to be done, and so it was kind of like they had to let us have that. And so I think that that's the
mhm,
piece of that rich dad poor dad that needs to get really reprogrammed and recoded, that is one of the stories. And there have been many countless other stories of women who have actually broke the mold with their own codes. And they're women who have been breaking the mold since the beginning of time, but we actually don't read about them in our history books either. So it's like that story has been retold by our own history books, not just by what the own women in our family have been through.
well, okay,
Just
so
need enough
interesting.
examples of
Yeah,
women.
interesting that you brought that up, because I was just talking about this today and yesterday, reading the history about some women told by the perspective of a woman. And I was talking to my partner Rich about it and said, I never got too much into history. Like, I think it's interesting, but I never really memorized it or didn't like pay too much attention, because I always thought, like, how do I know this really happened? I wasn't there. Like, this is just somebody telling me it happened. So like, I'm not going to invest too much of my emotional or intellectual energy into this story that they're
Mhm.
telling me. Like, who's telling the story? And so now, it's interesting because you never, as a fifth grade girl reading these history books, and not once is a woman mentioned. I'm like looking around my classroom, like half of us are women. Like, I don't like what's happening. Every once in a while they say like one sentence about a woman. And I know in my own family that women they come from a long line of powerful women, but they had to maneuver through the social status of the men they were married to. They needed that um, collaboration in order to have more mobility or freedom or whatever else. And so my son came to me last night and he said, we're actually distant relatives of the 22nd and 24th president Grover Cleveland. And he's like, Mom, people don't believe me that we're related. How are we related? So I explained it's my maternal grandmother, and she's like I think it's her great uncle. I think it would be her great uncle, or they share a great grandfather. I can't remember which. Again, I'm terrible with dates. I'd have to like look up the family tree. So I'm trying to research this stuff on Grover Cleveland, and I happened to find this article, actually a YouTube video, also about his wife. So he went into the presidency as a bachelor, and he got married um, in the third year because his sister was filling in as first lady, but she was a lesbian at a time when you really couldn't be a lesbian.
Right.
And she's like, okay, I've had it with this. I want to go back to my writing career. So you need to get married. So he ended up marrying a woman who's 27 years younger than him, but she was educated. She had a college degree at the time. And Grover himself grew up in poverty, worked his way up, became a lawyer, all this stuff. But his best friend that worked in the law office was very successful. He died, and this girl was his daughter. So
Mm,
many years later, she visited the White House. He proposed over letter or whatever. She became kind of like a Jackie Onassis, where the public was really enamored by her. And she's like, "What is this about? They're into me for the wrong reasons."
right.
But here's the feminine intelligence. If they're obsessing about me, I might as well put that notoriety to good. And so she started inviting working women to the White House of any job, just to get them together and to say like education is important. But interestingly enough, she didn't believe in the right for women's suffrage, or the right
Mm,
to vote. Women couldn't vote at that time. And she said, I have no doubt that women are smart or intellectual enough, but they seem to make poor political choices when given a choice. And I was like thinking about it, and I was like, I could see how you
Or
might think
she was
about that
probably
these days
thinking
too.
that, yeah, they're very heart based in a very mental
And it's
space.
not about like strategy and da 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 and all this stuff.
Right.
But it was interesting because I'm reading this whole account by really an ancestor that I didn't hear from my family, and I'm reading somebody else that took the time like to do this research and tell the story in a different way. And I'm like, interesting. And I'm trying to figure out what her life was like. He died of a heart attack at 72. She was only 44 and had 4 children. And one of them who died of diphtheria as a 12-year-old. So I have a 13-year-old daughter. So my heart's going out to her, right?
Right.
um,
Right.
and and I'm thinking like, gosh, what do you do? And this is her midlife crisis, right? She was first lady at age of 21, and then
Wow.
did all of this. But it's like I see she was working to empower women, and though he by no means was a feminist president, and I don't think we've really had any. I think Barack Obama, I'm going to give him credit. I think he was a feminist president,
Mm,
but she was influencing him. She was a different generation, and she was educated, and he did want to bounce ideas off of her and see what she thought about them. But she couldn't do any of that out in the open. And then
mhm.
her sister-in-law, lesbian, couldn't do any of that out in the open. You know what I mean? So they found their little underground tunnels and ways of existing and living without rocking the boat and shaking up the whole status quo. And I feel like in these times when
Yeah.
things are changing really fast and some ideas are like radical, we have to find the ways to sometimes even censor ourselves when what we have, the idea that we have might be, people don't understand it yet, or they don't see where we're coming from, and they might not
Well, yeah,
understand
I
it for
mean,
10 years.
you can't you can't teach somebody who's not willing to be, to shift, or,
Mhm,
like I always say, you can make a 5 course meal, but if somebody comes over and they're not hungry, nobody's eating your food.
mhm, mhm.
Nobody, and if they eat it, it doesn't feel like a good time. You can
Yeah,
just tell when somebody's hungry for what you're offering them. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, definitely. And how interesting, because even just you describing that to me sounded very epigenetic. And in terms of sexuality and sensuality, if I was to follow that line to you and your family,
Mhm,
and the openness in which you've raised your children, and allowing
mhm,
them to express themselves and to have conversations, and
mhm,
really own that. I mean, in terms of just talking about Shakti leadership, I think that the ultimate Shakti leadership is in the motherhood piece, because you're literally raising the next citizens,
mhm,
the future citizens. So the mothers out there, who are ready to raise, honestly, what it is to me is emotionally intelligent children. That is the ultimate Shakti leadership that we're looking for right now.
Mhm.
And then I think also Shakti entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
where we aren't going to feel this pressure to produce numbers, that there isn't like a like how awesome would it be to construct and create businesses and business plans that still are able to make all the costs, but
Mhm.
don't have to deal with regulations on how you, like, what you choose to put into your body, or how you live your life, or
Mhm.
you know where you choose to live, how you choose to live. It's just, it seems that that's what I'm saying, is like that would, to me, would be ultimate Shakti entrepreneurship, is where we can create spaces for people to work who are actually really creating their own dreams, and they don't have to, like people are working in places where they feel empowered. They're not compromising parts of themselves and
Right.
settling for a job to make money based on some value system. Like, it keeps coming down to that. And it's like, that to me seems like, wow, that if that was, I guess that means Shakti educational systems too,
Mhm.
Shakti based educational systems where we are more Montessori, and
Oh.
we're more project based, where we are really allowing children to show us their gifts, and
Mhm.
teachers are in service to those gifts, and making sure that students have all access to make those gifts a reality. And I think there are so many kids who know what they want to be and who they want to be from middle school,
Oh
and
yeah.
if they have the support, they would be making money long before parents ever spent money on college.
Mhm.
You see, but that flips this other system that we've been born into,
Yeah.
because then we're not paying money for college, and we're not paying for SATs and PSATs and
Mhm.
studying for that, and then spending tuition and loans, school loans, and like we're not feeding into this one economic system of value, that
Mhm.
it's like, and so it's almost like we're just all used to going that route. And I have to say, it feels so refreshing to be challenged in this way of being like, okay, I have complete sovereignty, where I don't have to deal with anybody above me at any moment in time, to I'm completely tapped into a system. Where do I land?
Mhm.
And where do I draw those lines for myself? And that's not right or wrong based on anybody else, but my story in this lifetime of what I'm here to do. It
Mhm.
might not be what my neighbor's here to do, my partner, or my children. It could be
Mhm.
completely different. And to be powerful and strong in owning, like, that is your journey, that's going to be your birthing journey.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? That patient journey that you were talking about, like,
Yeah.
being committed to that will allow you to be patient, because you trust the birth. You
Mhm.
know it's going to happen.
Mhm.
And that's when I think the mothered intuition comes in, even in men and women, because they're in the process of birthing. And if they're in the process of birthing from a place of alignment, you start to get those cues that you got as a mother of, like, we need a stable shelter. You start to see that when people are in their zones of creating their businesses or launching projects, it's like all of a sudden it gets really clear, like, okay, what's all going to be needed. And you have a choice to listen to those, and get into your masculine and make them happen, or you don't, and
Mhm.
you learn from that way too. uh,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
yeah, I just feel like the message to challenge folks to be diverse in approach,
Yep.
and don't feel like you have to follow anybody's 50 step, 7 step, 3 step, 10 step plan to being abundant.
Yeah, consume wisely. Consume wisely. Feel into the people that are teaching you, and do you align with their values too and what they have to say. And
Yeah.
and know that they're also a different person than you. So what works for them might not work for you. But I love what you said about the birth metaphor again, connecting it to like there's gonna be this baby born. If you can see that that end result. I woke up during the new moon in Taurus with this vision at 3 a.m. of how I saw myself and my career going, and for the first time in a long time, I just felt reinvigorated. I'm like, wow, the path is clear. And then I had doubts. It's like, oh, it's going to be a lot of work. But I'm like, oh, but I'm so good at that. Like, that's already what I'm really good at, and I'm craving to do what I'm really good at to help the world, to help humanity, and also pay off my student loans and take care of my family and all of that stuff. And all of a sudden now it's getting easier to do the daily tasks. It's getting easier to cook the meals. It doesn't feel so monotonous when something is in the future pulling you forward
Right, right,
and
right,
something that is exciting to you,
right.
that is
And I
making
think
mark
that
on the world.
that's the reprogramming of the subconscious that we're talking about for rich mom, poor mom. And
Mm-hmm.
the piece is, you know, what what excites you about life?
Yeah.
To sometimes go to that side of it and think about like, okay, well, what actually, that was a part of the Newman ritual we did this month, was like, what rituals are you really good at? Like, what rituals are you just a pro at? It's like nobody can get in the way of that ritual. Like for me, it's like, okay, yeah, my tea or my coffee in the morning, and like my quiet time, like somehow, some way, I always find a way to make that happen, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like that's a ritual that I'm really good at. For me, like my love making ritual for as well. It's like I
Well
love, yeah,
bragged.
like I love my practices for that. So
Mm-hmm.
thinking of those things that you naturally enjoy, how you show up for them,
Mm-hmm.
it's also realizing, when you're creating this abundance piece and you're ready to shift and move forward, that there's things that you're not ritualizing that are kind of like holding you back because you haven't put that special magic sauce on it yet.
Yes.
So
That's
you want to think about, what am I avoiding that's holding me back from taking this huge step forward in my business or in my dreams or with my children or with my partners or my parents or
mm-hmm.
whatever your goals are, and you start to think, okay, well, what am I actually avoiding here? What is it that I'm avoiding?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, I'm avoiding the fact that like I'm gonna have to really look at my finances,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna have to really adjust some of my spending habits,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And even the things that I feel entitled to, I'm gonna have some real conversations with myself about that. Okay, so when we're ready to when we realize like, fuck, that's what I'm avoiding, well, then take the things that you're good at, the
Mm-hmm.
rituals that you're good at, and bring some of those ritual practices into the thing that you're avoiding.
I
So
love
for
that.
example, when you go to look at your finances, what are some of the things that you do for love, that make love, that you set up for love making, that make it so fucking good?
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you could bring into looking at your finances? Well, maybe lighting some candles,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
maybe bathing, maybe
Mm-hmm.
putting on some lotions and getting like Oshun with it, getting sexy with it, and bringing some Lakshmi sauce. Maybe it requires having some berries and fruits around you.
Mm-hmm. You
So
text all this to Rich and let him just tell him when
right.
Kirti
So
said
these are the things that
every
we're
time I do
bringing into
my
this.
accounting, you have to be massaging my shoulders, my
Like,
legs, bring
I
some berries.
don't. I think naked. Like I feel like this all has to be done naked. I mean, the sex ritual. So
Yeah,
we
I have
look at our
actually had
finances naked. I
I've
think that's a
I've
great
done it.
practice.
Yeah. It made me laugh, but I don't know if it got the numbers crunched. We'll have to keep experimenting.
I think so, and I think making it fun and playful, right? Because the reason why you're avoiding it is it doesn't feel fun and playful, and your inner
Yeah.
child needs to feel fun and playful, or your divine feminine or female self has
Mhm.
to feel turned on by it, in order to get the mask, in order to get your male self to want to put it down and want to get involved and hang out and show up
Mhm.
for the female self. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
So take the things that you're avoiding and start to integrate. A good way to flip the code of the subconscious is to integrate pieces of the ritual that you really love and bring them into the things that you're avoiding,
Yeah.
and try to ritualize the moment.
Well, I
Mhm.
love the sexual metaphor as always. It just works so well. But when you say, treat it like you would your lovemaking practice. And I think of, okay, the way that I often treat my accounting or those things that I don't like to do so much is I kind of wait until I'm in the mood, right? And just like, I'm in the mood. Okay, I'll do it now. And if you do that in your love life, that's one way to do it. But in a long-term relationship, the mood is going to fade sometimes, especially if you have
Mhm.
kids, and it's you're going to have to work at it, and you have to create the sacred space for that lovemaking.
Mhm.
And sometimes, yeah, you just like on the fly. I can do my accounting on the fly. It still gets done at the end of the day. It doesn't always get done with the regularity that I would like, but it's the same thing with lovemaking. If you have
Right,
two busy lives, you have to create that sacred space to really connect. And sometimes
right, yeah.
my partner and I would made that appointment. Like, let's make an appointment. This is so unsexy, but we need to like make that appointment. And then we end up talking the whole time. But then we realize that is the lovemaking. That's what we needed.
That's what I was gonna say is like sometimes, oftentimes people will think, yeah, let's schedule our sex. But the truth is like, no, like if you're having to schedule sex, it means like you probably need to talk.
Mhm, mhm. Yep.
If you're having to schedule your sex, that probably means that you are needing to talk and have to like build on other levels because the sex, the sensual emotional exchange it can't be scheduled. It's just ever existent. However, guess what? You can like feed that energy, right, in other ways. So yeah, if you need to like schedule connection time where it's like, I want to touch base and just check in with you. But sometimes if we feel like we have to like that pressure to like show up sexually, it
Mhm,
can actually I mean most of the time I think it adds a pressure that sometimes it's like another task that the boss is telling you. I love that you said the sacred space, and then you said yeah, and then we ended up talking and we realized that is the lovemaking, and it's true. That is exactly the lovemaking is connection. We put so much pressure
mhm,
on our genitals to handle all our emotions.
mhm. Yeah, and it's the building blocks, taking it back to business too. It's like you want to be here for the big bang or the big payout, the big orgasm, the big climax, but what are the foundational steps to get,
Mm.
that big release? And I know just feminine energy in general, it just takes us often longer to warm up. I'm a very mental person, so I got to clear all that chitter chatter out and like put it aside to really get myself into that space so that I can fully receive. I mean, even if I kept it there, I could have a satisfying experience, but not as transformative as I might like it to be if I just took a little bit of that, like you said, ceremonial time and put the intention there to build something and to, build up that anticipation and really nurture self and look at what are these building blocks to this big thing. And yeah, like once, especially like a man's bringing up orgasm and he wants, like, I think Habib says the receipt, and Habib and Shafar have talked about this, the receipt of that he did a good job, or she wants the receipt that she was sexy enough, or whatever. It's the orgasm, but once you put that pressure on there, then it's not so fun anymore.
Right.
It is like, oh, another thing I got to do, and let's just, how much time can we get out of here like pretty quickly?
It's like the first moment you're a teacher, like a teacher gives a kindergarten. I've seen this so many times, like in observations, the kindergarteners, they get their paper, for the first time, and the crayons, and it's like paper and crayons, and you're like in community, the kids just like they're just so excited, like I can't wait to show like my artistry, like, and they're all master artists. They all believe they're master artists,
Yeah,
truly.
yeah,
Not only are they master artists, they're also master songstresses and songwriters and singers. They're all acrobatics. They're all hip hop stars. They're all superheroes and doctors and police officers. Like they are all of that at all times. And like they'll create their drawing, and all it takes is their teacher to say, "Stay in the lines."
yeah.
Them to be just like,
I,
right?
I had
So
no idea I was not a good singer until I was 7. It was the same thing. My dad's like, whoa. And I'm like, really? I thought I was awesome.
yeah, I have those moments too. And what's really funny is now when like if I'm being immature with my mother, I'm like, "And you said," she'll just be like, "Are you serious? Like I don't even remember telling you that. Like I don't know how that sat in your head." And I'm like, "Well, it clearly meant a lot to me as a child." She's like, and
Mm,
it's like, but that is like that was over. 20 years
Yeah.
ago, right? But this is the piece of the body keeps score. This is
Mm,
that piece of that ancestral healing that we're talking about, and that epigenetic stuff, is that the cells have memories. And sometimes when you feel stuff that you don't know, what you don't know, or you're like, I'm doing all of the things they're telling me, I'm
mhm,
following the rules, and the money's not coming in. I did this funnel, I did this advertisement,
mm.
I did my pain story. I did the,
Yeah.
like I did everything. I did my logo. I got my mission statement, my niche. I know my niche, right? It's like, where's the money? It's
Right.
just like, because that's not your soil. That's
Hmm.
that's not fertile place. And
Hmm.
that's why I sent you that thing where I said, man, sometimes it feels like a rose trying to root in sand.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
it's
beautiful.
for the feminine energy, there's so much more heart based stuff needed. We are not, and when I say we, I mean humanity.
Right.
We
Hmm.
have, the pendulum has swung way too much to the side of like 4-year track colleges,
Yeah.
reprograms, and like forcing people like yourself. I mean, when
Hmm.
I hear about your doctorate story, I'm like, dang, they have ROP for teachers. Why can't they have ROP for PhDs and doctors? Like all, like what we do to people in order to reach a certain status, to gain respect, when
Hmm.
it's like the system, who created that system?
Hmm.
It's like you look at the founding fathers of Harvard, who
Hmm.
created all of this system that we all, Stanford, Princeton, all this. And here we have all these amazing women who have mastered that system, and they still not fucking making as much money as a male professor. They still
Inferior
struggling.
thing.
They still struggling to start their own clinical practices. They still struggling to be doctors. They
Yeah.
still struggling to be heard as medical professionals talking about corona.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, and these are people who were the first found. I mean, Candace Pert was the first one to talk about the emotional influence on cells, and
Hmm.
about, wow, it's called the brain body. We need to start calling it the brain body, that they are not separate. Like, these are women scientists who, by the way, had to lie and cheat in order to get funding for their programs. See, we don't talk about this shit right now. Yet
Well,
there are all these women who are like, I need to, why can't, like you, maintaining 50 things,
well, not only that, but when she was in, she discovered her molecules of emotion.
right?
She discovered that in graduate school. She discovered the joy hormone,
Right.
in graduate school. And there's a mind body connection, and we could anesthetize pain through our feel good emotions. And people thought she was crazy, but her supervisor took credit for her work. So she even had
Totally.
about that. He's like, don't study that. But then she came up with this amazing, discovery, and and discovered endorphins. And then he's like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool, let me slap my name on it and take credit for it and get the
And,
award in
and
science.
trip out, she passed away from cancer.
Did she die of cancer? I wasn't sure
She
what it
definitely
was, but
passed away from an
oh,
illness. I was just listening to her husband, like, continued to present her work. How beautiful is
yeah,
that?
they worked together.
In her honor, and talked about all her projects, and you could still hear just him and his love for her. I just, it was so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, I mean, I still go back to just listen to her talks because I'm so freaking moved by them. But I find that that's very interesting, because I'm like, if you needed an example of what we do to the divine feminine, you
Mm-hmm.
see it when you see these strong, amazing, academic, athletic, well, like go-getting women who have mastered the patriarchy, but it's by dampening their own feminine qualities to such a degree to be
Yeah.
successful in this system that is not truly supporting the feminine.
Right. Right.
So again, it comes back to your original question. It's like, at what cost? Like,
Mm-hmm.
think about what your abundance, and at what is the cost, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying, of your investment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is the return rate? Like, really,
But
what
yeah.
are you
Yep.
getting?
Yeah. The cost, the value of what you are investing into, whether, and even these things like epigenetic, like you said, the body keeps score, and this epigenetic markers and reminders of things, those can go one of two ways. It could keep you away from eating the poison berry and give you that intuitive wisdom, or it can also keep you stuck in the trauma story of money, or whatever else. It has pros and cons, just like anything. It's about being aware. So yeah, I think, and perhaps this is a masculine intelligence, but this audit, doing these self audits of, okay, what are my thoughts? Like, how does this keep me safe? How is it not working for me? How is it, I just like these approaches that you're using both. You're using the analytical, you're using the intuitive, you're bouncing back and forth intuitively, maybe, to see which one I need, try out the different things. But yeah,
And it's not
absolutely.
hard, folks at home are like, well, I don't even know where to begin with that. Well, think about the things that are going really well for you right now.
Hmm.
Not that somebody else is saying is that you're successful at, but
Hmm.
what are the things that you truly feel super successful at in your life right
Hmm.
now, or you feel
Hmm.
like are evolving or growing? And then from those things that you think about, take the and see like, okay, where am I not feeling that?
Hmm.
And then start to apply those things that should the places where you're feeling really beautiful, start to apply some of those practices to where you're not feeling that.
Hmm.
And that's how you literally take nature's code and just start to like flip the subconscious,
Yeah.
to start to shift, you know your thoughts and your energy, and then ultimately, your abundance and your manifestation and your law of attraction.
Hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Wow, gosh, this has been really deep and really fulfilling. I know for me personally, and I hope for everybody that's tuned in. I know that there's a renewed interest in the divine feminine. Deepak Chopra is doing his 21-day meditation with Alicia Keys on the divine feminine. So that's
Mm.
a sign that I'm like, okay, this like tapped in, that's happening. Yeah, I'm my business mentor is doing a free webinar on Wednesday, which, she's the one that brought me to this six-figure status. So
That's
I'm
awesome.
yeah, so anybody, and I was going to reach out to you and Shafar too, if you want to join. Rich and I are going to be there, but anybody that's watching this, if you catch it in time, email me, DM me on Instagram, whatever. If you want an invite, then I'll send you the link. Um, there's lots of people that are stepping up and being leaders, in this new way of doing things, and finding true wealth, true abundance, where you can go to sleep not frenzied and stressed, and your body is appropriately tired, and you are nurturing and regenerating, taking care of yourself and your family, and you find that balance. And the balance isn't always in the daily, it's in the maybe the monthly.
Mhm.
You're here for a while, now you're back here, but how to keep that balance. And I know that your work is so beautiful with that integration too, and honoring both. And like you said, how do we become better humans, not more so women or men, or how can we empower ourselves to come into balance with our internal feminine, masculine? It's the way through, because we're ready.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being on. I can't believe we're almost done with season 1, but good things to come for season 2. And thank you to everyone who joined us here, either live or the recording. And we will see you next week for our season finale. It's a surprise right now, but I'll be announcing this in the
Hey.
newsletter. All right. Good
Bye,
night, Kirti.
Daddy.
Bye.
Namaste. Bye.